Welcome back for another recap. This is a recap for my game, Omnia Regna, progress that was made in the month of June 2019. So this is broken up into 4 recaps, really. I make one per week at the end of each week, and then I string them together and edit it and publish this to YouTube. But here's a quick summary. Here's what the game looks like at the end of June, and a summary of what I did in June. So there are both visible and invisible changes to the game. So we'll get more into detail week to week, but overall, added zones and zone transitions, so there are these teleporters in the game now. There are now chat tabs and context menu. We can't see that in the published version of the game because I haven't pushed that. That was very recent. But you can add chat tabs and set the filters for them. They're now prototype game items. So over here, there is what I call the armory. Come on. And, oh, Bill's been destroying the swords over there. So swords spawn over here. You're supposed to pick them up and use them to despawn the prototype NPCs. I added the whole dialogue framework, so talking to NPCs, reading signs, etc. There are now notifications when tickets in-game change. And some of the invisible changes I made were server-side performance improvements. So there's less polling, there's more binary message encoding, just to make sure that the game runs smoothly for what we have right now. And I put in a bunch of tools on the admin side for world building. And won't go into detail there because you can't really see that when you play the game. It's more for me when I'm editing the world in-game. There's more information in the weekly videos anyway. So I hope you enjoy the week-to-week summaries. And without further ado, here they are. This is the summary for the first week of June. And this week, I added teleporters to the game. Zip and zap. And I added multiple zones. In addition to the fact that the admin can now appear and disappear at will. Like that. Also, I can change the label and the tile set in the tile of the admin. Let me show you the different zones we have. So this teleporter takes us to a zone. Right now there's a bug where the NPCs are indestructible if they get here. Then this zone is a couple different tests. So there's a teleporter that gets you back out, and there's also a hidden teleporter. So these teleporters are implemented using a new component called a trigger. And triggers have different types. There is the transport trigger and the message trigger. These teleporters are all, of course, the transport type triggers. And these are deployed into the game now. So there is a hidden one and the other path there just to mess with the viewers. Something to have fun with. In the test version of the game, there's another type of trigger here. It's sitting right here and it is called a message trigger. And right now it has a funny bug where if you stand in that spot, it constantly spams the message that is programmed to send. Also in the admin tool, I added these rotating red squares to mark where triggers are. And added this all new panel called the Entities panel, or Entities Editor, really. And it allows you to click on any position in the game and see all the entities there. And right now, I think they're sorted from ground up, although the ground is on the top. I guess it's sort of sorted backwards, you know. Hey, bugs, you know. Anyway, the ground tile there has a tile and a position, and the trigger there has a trigger component. And you can see here type is step. And the action to perform is a transport action. And this over here is a type step action type message, and the message is actually in the component. So a couple of things. We can add entities and destroy entities. So for example, I could take this unlucky NPC and simply remove him from the game by hitting one button. And I also added some extra things here for the admin. I can set my position at will just by typing a number, hitting update. I already showed the fact that we can hide and show the avatar of the admin. Also, there are quick links here to transport to different zones. That's the zone we were playing with just now. And when we're in this panel, I can also click on any position on the view and just instantly go there. Hey, this is the summary for the second week of June. In this week, I added some prototype items in the game. So I extended the walkway here to extend over to this island, where I call this little area the armory. And you can see this new inventory slot system. If I can pick up to 3 swords. And now swords are used to destroy NPCs, so that hapless little orc there gets killed. And I have this set up so that items have durability. Every time you slay an NPC, it uses a point of durability. And as soon as it goes to 0, the item gets destroyed. So there's my first sword being destroyed. I can also drop these into the game by right-clicking on them. And if I'm not holding a sword and I step on an NPC, it doesn't affect them. So I also worked on a bit of the chat system. So there's this pop-up now. It's a little buggy right now. It should allow me to whisper myself, but right now it says GM. If I'm over on this screen though, I should be able to whisper myself. Also, there's going to be a built-in reporting system. As soon as I hook that up, that should open the same window as this right here, where you do a new report player and give some information about what the chat message was that was flagged. And I haven't hooked this up either yet, but there's going to be options for purging the individual message or banning the player. So moderation steps. And it took a while to get this pop-up to work, and I'm still not done with it, but it'll be there. The rest of the week, I worked on performance improvements so that the game runs under the baseline threshold on Amazon Web Services. That took a couple of days, and I wrapped up the week with some extra tools that I built in to the game that I can show you right here. So now, in addition to being able to select an entity, if it's a position component, you can go to and select the position that the entity was in. It's kind of funky when there are NPCs that move around. If I pick a fixed position one, I can go. So one thing this is useful for is I can find a player. Also, I made it so if you double click entity, it selects them in the entity viewer, and then go and select. Here's the special logged out zone. If the player was logged in, it would jump to where that player is in the game. So that's about it for the second week of June. Like I said, at least 2 or 3 days we're handling bugs and performance improvements. So there's not much to show as a difference to the game other than these items. This is the weekly wrap-up for the third week of June, and it was a shorter week. I had a few days off. I worked on 2 main things this week. So an improvement to the ticketing system came first. So if I were to change a ticket, just add a test note. 2 things now show up in the user interface. The ticket panel tab shows a little animation, and the tickets that have changed since the player last looked at them show up in goldenrod. And clicking on any ticket shows the changes in the history, also goldenrod. When we return back out, then it's the alert goes off. So worked on that one day. And then the other 2 days of the week that I worked on the game, I added the beginnings of the dialogue system. So the skeleton is in my way. Okay, we move on to the sign. This is the first dialogue I added, which is a single state transition, just reading a sign by stepping on the sign. Another one I have here on the bridge, where it says something and then asks you to press space or enter to continue, or you can click the button, and then it sends something else. So these dialogues look like this. Here's the original first sign that I made. And the 2-step trigger on the bridge has this dialogue where it's 2 tells with a pause in between. And then just the basic mechanics for that took a day. And then another day I spent on more elaborate dialogues, like this named NPC named Bob. So there's now, if you hit T, it'll change the context of the input from normal actions to talking. And also, instead of chat being the default, there's now an action bar. So you have to hit chat, or I think I did Yeah, the C key to chat. Anyway, let's go talk to Bob. So, although Bob still can move around during the dialogue temporarily because of a bug, we can't move. So movement stops working, and we're basically in an interaction mode with Bob. I can ask his name, his job, and then start typing keywords that are hinted at from the initial dialogue responses. So, for example, he says, when you say guard, he says, that's my job. I make sure all you peasants stay in line. So if you say peasant, it says, you are a peasant, aren't you? And you can answer yes or no. This is a multiple choice kind of dialogue state. They say yes, it says of course you are. But if instead we said no, we're now in a special dialogue state where if we knew to answer GM for Game Master, they'll say something special. Oh really? Why haven't you paid me yet? Whereas when in the normal conversation state, if you type something like GM, he says I just can't help you with that. So yeah, that's a more complicated dialogue that looks like this with multiple states. There's the normal conversation state with the things that we can ask him about. And then there's the special peasant state where he asks you yes or no. And then the special who are you state where if you answer GM, he tells you something special. Otherwise, he'll say whatever. Either way, you go back to conversation state. So it's a basic directed graph. Right now it's set up in JSON, but I want to enhance the GM's tools to allow editing and creating new dialogues. We just got the basic mechanics down this week. And so there's more to do here. There are requirements for dialogue choices to appear or to be invoked. And there's also side effects for dialogues. We haven't done any of that yet. And also bugs like the fact that Bob is still able to wander around even though we're still talking to him. And the fact that this cancel button doesn't work. Anyway, you have to escape now, and then you can walk around again. Anyway, that's it for the 3rd week of June. And this is the wrap-up for the 4th week of June. So I worked on 2 things. This dialogue panel editor thing. So whereas before in-game dialogues had to be edited through the JSON, and I would take this entire string and put it into a text editor, edit it and paste it back and save it here. Now I have this nifty dialogue editor. So we can see for Bob there, his dialogue has 4 states in it. There's an initial start state and a default choice. This is where we put the greeting message. And then conversation, peasant, and who were the test states where you could interact with Bob. You can ask him his name, his job, say goodbye, all those things. So I set up this panel so that if you select a state, you can then select a choice and then see the events that happen, and then you can add to the events. It's off to the right there. So you can add a pause, you can delete a pause, you can rearrange things. So using this panel, I'll be able to add and edit and all of the in-game dialogues, basically, in the game. So the other thing I worked on is in some bug fixes and improvements to chat. So now there are different tabs in chat. If I go talk to Bob here, it switches to the dialogue tab, which shows only the messages that happen while we're in the dialogue. So, for example, if as a GM I were to whisper and say, hello, it doesn't show here until we say goodbye. And it switches back to the all tab, and you can see hello. Also, there are the chat tabs are customizable. So, for example, I added this chat tab. It's now under the profile. You can add, remove, and change individual tabs, setting up the kinds of messages you want to appear in that chat tab. There's also an ignore list, so that if someone is bugging you in the game, you can add them to the ignore list, and you won't hear from them ever again. Similar to other MMOs. So that's it for both the last week of June and the entire month of June. I hope you enjoyed watching this recap. We'll see you again at the end of July. Hopefully there will be a lot more stuff added to the game. See you then.